I do not know from where to start. Perhaps when you, a little child, were learning how to read and write. What was the place where you were born? Was it a highland, close to sea? Let's start from early morning dawn, from deepest roots of your historic tree. 14th and 15th century Ireland. It's the numerous attempts to establish university here on the island of Ireland. However, as Irish people entered the last decade of the 16th century, there was still no such established institution. Let's look across the Irish Sea. What was happening there on mainland Europe? The religious upheavals of the earlier part of the century have come to a relatively peaceful period. Europe saw a flowering of new universities and colleges. However, on that list, there was still no university from Ireland. You see, not far along the historic period has the Protestant Reformation taken place, and as a result, it was thought that if the Reformation was to be firmly embedded in the society, the Irish inhabitants and its clergy must be trained in the Protestant faith. So, what could be done? Universities, as institutions to get some knowledge and for information to sift through the arteries of our societies was an obvious solution to do just that. Now, in 1590, the loyal residents of Dublin have persuaded the mayor and the corporation of Dublin to set aside some land. It was about a kilometre to the east of the city walls, and it was a previously existent Augustan priory of All Hallows, a small monastery where some land and ruined buildings have been left after it has been dissolved under Henry VIII as part of the Reformation of Ireland. Remember that at the end of the 16th century, Ireland was ruled by the English monarchy. And of course, every major decision had to come from the crown. Well, now that there was some land available for a university, the Archdeacon of Dublin, Henry Usher, travelled to London in the year 1591. With him, he carried some letters, the message of which was very clear: that a university in the city could be good means to plant religion, civility, and true obedience in the hearts of these people. The application was made to Queen Elizabeth I, and her willingness to license a college for learning was clear. And as a result, on 3rd of March 1592, the College of the Holy and Undivided Trinity near Dublin, founded by the most serene Queen Elizabeth, was founded. Now, mostly known as Trinity College, this was the beginning of a world-renowned university whose historical heritage is one of its key foundational pillars. The early college was governed by a board consisting of the Provost, position which was appointed by the Crown until as late as 1922, and senior fellows. They were empowered to make laws, statutes, and ordinance for the newly established institution. Adam Loftus, the first Provost of Trinity College, wanted to have university statutes for college to be independent, self-perpetuating academic institution, empowered to confer degrees. Trinity was incorporated as a university from its very inception. There is no better place to talk about
the early board of Trinity College than here in Challoner's Corner. Challoner's Corner, you might be wondering, what is it? Well, this is the smallest cemetery in Ireland. It is actually located here in Trinity College, between the chapel and the dining hall. Here you can find memorial tablets and some grave slabs of previous provosts of Trinity College. Dr. Luke Challoner, one of the most notable of the individuals commemorated here. Being one of the founding fellows of Trinity College, he was described as by far the most active man in the foundation, the building, and the early management of Trinity. Challoner was one of the key negotiators with Queen Elizabeth I on behalf of Trinity. This would be concerning some grants for land or other support which the early college might have needed. He would also, on numerous occasions, travel to London to purchase books, such as in year 1603, when he came back with 4,000 volumes of new books, which he added to the library. And amazing to see and to know the fact that
Some of them are still present in the library of Trinity College today. The college received its first students in 1594. But how did it look at the time? The Elizabethan quadrangle is the earliest architectural layout of the early college. The early built college was a quadrangle of three-story buildings with chapel, hall, and kitchen on the north side, cleverly incorporating part of the former remain buildings of the Augustine monastery. It gradually developed, and in 1597 was a residence to 10 scholars. The quadrangle continued to form the nucleus of the early college buildings until far into the Georgian period. The top of its south range was completed with a varied gallery, and its east-west was with student chambers. Plans show it situated here, between where you are and that small building behind me, which is the 1937 reading room. The north range of the Elizabethan quadrangle laid on the axis that links the bell tower of Trinity College to the front gate, and its southern range extended from that building behind me, which is the old library, and the public theatre on the left-hand side. Perhaps clearly demonstrating to you how small the early college was at the time. First few decades of college existence saw some teaching activities. From the first register entry of Provost Winter's rule, we can immerse ourselves into the early college and its everyday life. The board order states, "The porter suffer not the clothes of any person whatsoever to be dried within the quadrangle. That no woman was to be allowed enter the college unless such as are approved of by the provost, and that no scholar is to be allowed out to the town except such as are licensed by ticket from the provost or some of the fellows," clearly demonstrating the radical changes which our society has undergone over the past 400 years.
the inscription on the monument behind me reads, "What he happily began, he left for another to finish." It is dedicated to Provost George Brown, who died on the 4th of June 1699. But what can it refer to? Well, as decades went by, college grew in shape and size. And in the last decade of the 17th century, a new square was planned to provide accommodation for the increasing student numbers. At the start of the 18th century, the new square began to take shape with the completion of its east range. Well, that east range still survives today, and it's behind me and is known as the Rubrics. It is the oldest portion of the college's fabric and was initiated by Brown's bequest. The year of Rubrics' completion isn't recorded in the college's archives. However, historians place it within the start of the new century, with year 1702 as the final agreed year of the Rubrics completion. Not only it is the oldest surviving building on campus, it possesses a special architectural, artistic, historical, and social interest to the city of Dublin. Behind me is the monument to Provost Baldwin. When Baldwin took provostship, the academic performance had become slack. With unruly and turbulent body, the riotous conduct associated with political differences had become endemic. And as a result, year 1732 was a particularly bad one. Edward Ford. He was the son of Archdeacon of Derry and was appointed a fellow in Trinity in year 1730. Well, Ford didn't really get along with the students, and as a result his rooms and windows were constantly vandalized. He lived in the recently built Rubrics in number 25. The date, 7th of March, 1734, will be remembered for long, up until this day. After a long working day, Ford went to sleep in his accommodation. Below his windows, some students gathered in a new square. They took some stones and smashed Ford's windows. He was furious. He woke up. He took out a pistol beside him and fired it in the direction of the misbehaved students. The students ran off. Later that night, students were back, but this time with firearms, a possession which was strictly forbidden to be owned by a student under the pain of expulsion. Ford, having heard their return, looked out the window again. In his nightshirt, he pointed the pistol down through the broken pane of glass, and a shot was fired, but this time from below. Ford looked down and realized he was fatally wounded. He fell on the floor of his apartment, and his last words were, recalled by a student who attended him, "I do not know who, but God forgive them. I do." After that, Ford passed away. A man should never be ashamed to own that he has been in the wrong, which is but saying that he is wiser today than yesterday. Jonathan Swift. The spirit of the 18th century Dublin still breathes strongly through the Georgian buildings of the front square. The majestic Palladian facade alongside the residential wings that run back from it was completed in 1759. In the year 1777, the work was begun on the public theatre, which is more commonly known as the exam hall, perhaps a place which students fear the most.
Its walls are lined with framed portraits of people connected to Trinity throughout its long history.
Here, looking down at me, is the foundress of Trinity College, Queen Elizabeth I. Inside you can also find a 1684 magnificent organ, which is the oldest Irish-made existing organ case. On the south side of the exam hall is a chandelier that was designed to hold 60 wax candles and used to hang in the old Irish House of Commons, just about 100 meters from here across the college green. How does it feel to do the exams here? I have had no luck of doing so. I wonder if any of the portraits help you. I wonder if they whisper in your ear,
This is the correct answer. This is the box that you should pick.
that I don't know. However, I have no doubt that all these people They're very proud to see the students continuing to learn and expand their knowledge in the university that they have built. The Parliament Square has a grandiose outlook because of the answering porticos of the public theatre and the chapel across it. Now, they were built from the mid-1790s up as far as the early start of the 1800s. It was at this time that the 17th century chapel and the hall were demolished, taking with them the last part of the early Elizabethan quadrangle. The chapel, with its pillared porch, splendid plasterwork, and classical interior, was the final addition to the beautiful Georgian part of Trinity College campus. Provost Andrews, who was in position at the time it was built, had a splendid taste in music, and he addressed himself to the cultivation of music on campus. In 1762, the college choir was established with a Sunday choral service instituted in one of the most beautiful buildings on campus. During the academic year, the Trinity College Chapel Choir performs a broad range of church music, from Tudor to contemporary. And as light streams through the stained glass windows, you can come here in the evening and immerse yourself into the divine aura of the organ's notes. Provost Andrews also left behind a masterpiece of Palladian architecture, the Provost's House. It is the only Dublin stone-built mansion of that period which is still occupied as a private residence today. It was built in 1759 for Provost Francis Andrews himself. Now it is a residence to Provost Linda Doyle, the first female provost of Trinity College in all of its history.
Life is never fair, and perhaps it is a good thing for most of us that it's not. Oscar Wilde. One of the landmarks of Trinity College is definitely the Campanile Tower. It's the first thing that one sees when enters through the front gate of Trinity College. It attracts thousands and thousands of cameras from all over the world. Not many people know that college used to have another bell tower. The name was Richard Castle's bell tower, but it was demolished at the end of the 18th century. Campanile was a gift by Archbishop Beresford. It was to commemorate his election as a chancellor of the university. The great bell in the newly built belfry was first rung just before the divine services on Sunday, 26th of November, 1854.
It was first thought to insert a large building into the vista
From the front gate.
However, architects advised against it, rather a small but highly architectural object. Lanion's campanile, with its noble and shapely silhouette, now became an architectural symbol of Trinity College. It raises its dome and cross in the location which is very close to where the steeple of All Hallows was once raised in the 16th century Dublin skyline.
If one looks at the keystones of arches, one will find carved heads,
which depict Socrates, Homer, Plato, and Demosthenes. On the corners of the campanile, on the pedestals, rise 4 figures. They represent higher faculties of Trinity at the time, which is divinity, science, medicine, and law. The campanile has indeed become one of the most recognizable landmarks of both Trinity College and Dublin as a whole. It is a symbol of unique history and rich heritage of this college. However, it has its own superstition. It is believed that the location of the Campanile Tower is where the original monastery used to be, and hence the monks that used to live here have haunted the bell tower. And now that every student that walks past underneath the arches of the Campanile while the bell rings will fail their exam. In the 1840s, Trinity College, just outside of its eastern side of the campus, saw the laying of Dublin's first railway, an event which made people acknowledge that the Industrial Revolution had begun in Ireland. The distinguished professor of natural and experimental philosophy Humphrey Lloyd, accompanied by his colleagues, proposed the foundation of a professorship of civil engineering, which was followed by the board's recognition of engineering as an academic discipline, in fact making it one of the oldest engineering schools in the world. The discipline needed a building, which partly led to the creation of one of the most beautiful buildings on campus, and it is definitely worth of a documentary itself.
When first opened, it was known as the New Building, and now as the Museum Building. It was completed in year 1857, a successful experiment based on Romantic Ruskinian principles and executed with a wealth of native Irish materials. John Ruskin, who was an English writer, philosopher, art critic, and polymath of the Victorian era, would later call the museum building quite the noblest thing ever done for my teaching. With less than a year of completion, it was regarded as a catalyst to new architecture and was seen as a revolution in public taste.
Venetian on the exterior with Moorish elements on the inside. It represents a radical departure from the late Georgian classicism that prevailed Trinity architecture in the 1830s. And therefore, it can be justified to be one of the most influential buildings of the Victorian period in Ireland. It grew out from a highly intellectual soil, rich in the world's most advanced ideas on art and architecture. It will forever keep in itself the history of a country recovering from a famine, and it can really be seen as a bridge between the past and the future, where its ideas on art and decor, its design, were drawn from a range of eclectic sources looking back to the past, while the constructed building embraced the present by exploiting the most modern and up-to-date industrial ways of production. It is the first major example of polychromy derived from indigenous stones of Ireland and Britain. Polychromy is referred to as the practice of decorating architectural elements in a variety of different colors. Well, here you can find green marble from Connemara, red marble from Cork, black marble from Kilkenny. On the outside you will see colorful marble roundels, and there's no better way to comment on it than the way John Ruskin did. He said, "Winter, as colorless as it was cold, relieved only by roundels of inland Irish marble." The original building was cutting edge in the management of its internal environment. For example, the chosen surface of the brickwork of the domes was believed to be an attempt to limit the effects of condensation from the rising humidity. If you've ever been in the building, have you ever thought, what are those holes? Well, to add to the building's uniqueness, it has a remarkable ventilation system. And the architects decided to express it, not like nowadays to hide it, but to express it architecturally and ornamentally. And it can now be mistaken by some for a a simple decorative design. Next time you're in the building, have a look both on the inside and outside for the air intakes and outtakes, and see how many you can find. A true masterpiece of Gothic Revival architecture. It was designed by Dean and Woodward and has changed enormously since it was first built, mostly on the interior. However, even though most of its interior cannot be changed back into its original state, most likely, there is one thing that's lost forever. Here, above me, in the central hall of the museum building, was one of the most unusual installations. George Francis Fitzgerald was a professor of natural and experimental philosophy, in today's world known as physics. Well, Fitzgerald purchased a glider from Otto Lilienthal, who was a German pioneer of aviation and one of the first people to have successful flights with gliders. Well, Fitzgerald would take his glider, walk not too far away from here, just to College Park, opposite the south side of the building, and would perform experiments with it. And they would definitely fly better than mine. Following Fitzgerald's retirement, his famous glider was hung here, above me, hanging from the central domes of the central hall of the museum building. It perhaps inspired students to go to their lectures, to learn something new. However, unfortunately, one student thought it was a good idea to put a match to the rope holding the glider. The glider fell, it caught fire, and was destroyed. The museum building didn't lose its charm without the glider. However, there's still a lesson to be learned from that event. On the flamboyant facades of the building, you'll be able to find animals such as squirrels, cats, monkeys, exotic birds including parrots. If we look up some of the metopes depict a number of Aesop's fables. You will see a blackbird picking berries, a greenfinch defending her nest from a lizard. You can find a squirrel, cats holding unfortunate mice in their mouths, and even monkeys playfully pulling the tail of an adjacent cat. Here, in the museum building, the more you look, the more you will find. It astonishes me how, over all of those years, I would study here, I would pass it by on a daily basis, but I would never raise my head to discover all of its beauty. Perhaps it's hidden from an ordinary pedestrian rushing to their work, to some lectures, but I advise you to be the next one, to stand beside it, to admire it, perhaps read it like an open book, see it as a painting, hear it. I have no doubt that its nature will capture you, and its animals will definitely come to life. Walking around the museum building is just like walking in the museum itself. The museum building is indeed a building which acts as a museum. You walk around, you look at its details, and the more you look, the more you will find, both on the exterior and the interior. It is an open museum for all of us. It is now a permanent repository and a source of information on the geology, flora, and fauna of Ireland, which thankfully and hopefully will be kept reserved for generations to come. 3 decades after, in 1892, Trinity College commemorated the tercentenary of its foundation. A decade later, the completion of a major new building resulted from the graduates' initiative to mark the tercentenary by a permanent addition to the college amenities. This was the Graduates' Memorial Building, a building which stands out in the splendid architecture of Front Square. The location where the Graduates' Memorial Building stands used to be occupied by a red brick range. However, it was eventually demolished, and a spectacular building which adds a touch of late Victorian era to the part of Front Square was completed in 1902.
The Graduates Memorial Building, or shortly known as the GMB, houses the college's oldest societies. The University Historical Society, known as the HIST, was founded in year 1770. It is the oldest student society in the world. The University Philosophical Society and the University Theological Society, which is known as Theo. These societies have had members with now world-renowned names: Wolfe Tone, Robert Emmet, Samuel Beckett, Bram Stoker, Oscar Wilde. And after listening to the members of the societies today, I've no doubt that in 100 years' time, the list will only get bigger.
I hope the members of the societies will forgive me for sitting on these chairs. I ask for your forgiveness now. I'm sitting in the debating chamber of the GMB, where students, professors can come and some listen, but others debate some of the most vital and important societal topics of today's world. It is a place really worth at least visiting, and you can also get yourself involved in the debates. So I would really recommend coming here to immerse yourself into the magical atmosphere of the GMB debating chamber. In 1904, shortly after the GMB was completed, women were finally admitted to the college degrees on the same footing as men, later producing some of the best female graduates in the country, from presidents to authors and scientists. A happy ending to an everlasting and unjustified struggle for the female population of Dublin, which lasted for more than 300 years.
Our greatest glory consists not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Oliver Goldsmith.
Trinity College. When first founded, it was a fully Protestant university, and it was implanted in what was then a majority Catholic population of Dublin. Surely wasn't a good idea, was it? Religious wars, political rebellions, the relationship between Ireland and United Kingdom. Surely Trinity was destined to be affected by the rich, historic, political, and religious upheavals of the last few centuries. First, Catholics weren't allowed to study in Trinity, followed by the Catholic Church of Ireland banning its members from attending this university, a ban which has only been lifted in 1970s. For centuries, the student body was split by your relationship towards the Whigs and the Tories, by the rebellions of Ireland against the United Kingdom, and by generally your religious beliefs. For example, Theodore Barlow, you drank to the memory of Sorel, the horse that threw a mortally injured King William III in 1702. True? Expelled. Forbes, A Jacobite? Have you proposed a toast in the memory of King William III where you compared him to a highwayman called Balf, which was hung on the streets of Dublin a few years ago? Yes? Please have your degree suspended and be permanently expelled from this university. In 1708, when that previous event with Forbes happened, it brought more division than people would have thought. You see, during the meeting when Forbes was stripped from his degree, some of the votes were against this degradation. Not only it brought up the issue of the Jacobite suppressions, which happened in college at the time, but it has also raised the unsolved questions and problems regarding the relationship between college and the university. The political, religious, and cultural differences have kept flowing through the arteries of this college up as far as the 20th century. When in April 1916 the seizing of the GPO and other strategic points in the inner city of Dublin took place, Trinity and its immediate safety was assured from overseas. After the consent of the Provost, the first party of troops to come from Britain entered the premises of college and established their headquarters here. On the same pathways which everyone walks on today, you would have found soldiers sleeping on the steps of the buildings and their horses tied to the railings of the front square. Now, one of the few original versions of the Proclamation of Irish Republic can be found in the old library of Trinity College. The fact at that time, while being on different sides of the barricades, was pretty much impossible to believe in. Unfortunately, after the Easter Rising, things have not improved. And on the 13th of June, 1921, there was a match being played here. A 21-year-old student by the name of Kathleen Wright was sitting beside her fiancé and watching this game, just like hundreds of other people. Well, during the cricket game, the match was played between the military of Ireland and the gentlemen of Ireland. Clearly not the best combination in the midst of the troubles of the 1920s. Well, as a result, 2 shots were fired from the direction of Nassau Street. Kathleen, completely unexpecting it, looked at her fiancé and said, "I have a terrible pain in my chest." Kathleen was shot, and a few hours later, she was announced dead. The match was cancelled, abandoned. However, even during the times of total unification, things have not improved. Well, when the news of the surrender of Germany came in 1945, the routine of night patrols, which has been happening during the period of the war, had familiarized some of the students with ways to rooftops of the buildings. And therefore, some students found themselves at the roof, at the central flagpole of the west front of Trinity College, and began to hoist the hammer and sickle, Union Jack, and stars and stripes to celebrate the victory of the Allies. The Irish tricolour also found its way to the top. However, as the crowd watched these memorable scenes, a highly nationalistic group came and staged an anti-Trinity demonstration, resulting in the Union Jack being burned. While at that time, 1 in 4 students from Trinity were from Northern Ireland. And what they did was they burned the Irish flag down. Of course, the crowd was outraged, chaos, violence. The police had to intervene eventually. Well, in the end, everything was fine, but that event once again demonstrated the political and cultural volatile environment which surrounded Trinity from its very roots of foundation.
Ever tried? Ever failed? No matter. Try again, fail again, fail better. Samuel Beckett.
Now, if there is a place in Dublin where magic happens, where would it be? Maybe here, in Trinity. I'm standing here in the dining hall of Trinity College, which was built in 1761. It is a place where students and professors can have their meals during the day and for scholars to enjoy their dinner in the evening. Every time I eat here, my appetite definitely improves. However, this isn't the magic I wanted to talk to you about. 1984, 13th of July, one of the hottest days of the summer. The dining hall went on fire. The fire started up somewhere high on the roof and quickly spread throughout the building. The flames reached the wooden roof and it quickly collapsed. Thankfully, at night, the fire brigade came and extinguished the fire. Next morning, people wanted to see what has been left from the building. They came in while it was still in smoke. To their astonishment, they saw the large, century-old portraits still hanging from the walls of the dining hall. Perhaps looking down at those people that came in, some giggling, some with a smile on their face, thinking, did all those people really think that we were going to leave Trinity that easily? If one strolls past the dining hall at a very, very quiet night, take a moment and you might be able to hear some cutlery noise and some century-old conversations. Small question for you. What do you think is Trinity's most valuable asset? Its architecture? Perhaps some would say its students. But I have another answer, which lies in this box. And my answer to it is that perhaps an invaluable asset which Trinity has is the Trinity College Library. Trinity College Library is the oldest and by far the biggest library in Ireland. Its collection, which has been built over 400 years, is a resource for scholars, students, professors all over the world. Year 1601 marks the beginning of the Trinity College Library. It was the year when in June, Luke Challoner went with a suitcase to London booksellers and brought back here to Trinity 350 items. In later years, Luke Challoner and Henry Usher, the early fellows of Trinity College, would pack their bags, travel to London again, and be responsible for the early build-up of the Trinity College Library. The purpose of the early collection of the library was clear, and it was teaching of the Protestant clergy. And only after college grew, its library expanded, its library became the resource for the formation of the theology of the Church of Ireland and educate its Irish Protestant students with arguments against their Catholic compatriots. Have you ever wondered what was the earliest collection that the Trinity Library had? And thanks to the particular book, we know about it, because it is the earliest extent of the college affairs, and it dates back to 24th of February 1601. And in the particular book, there is a list with the name Libri in Publica Collegii Bibliotheca. In it is the recording of the earliest titles which were present in the library. You can see some classical titles from Aristotle, Plato. There were atlases from Mercator and Ptolemy. And to add to that, there were some theological titles. To my amazement, most of the books and some of the manuscripts present in the library in the year 1601 are still here in its walls up to this day. An enormous achievement, I would say, to the librarians and the library staff, which kept the library flowing through all the turbulent historic events which it went through. However, there was one event which we need to talk about. Year 1689 was the year when Trinity College Library came close to total destruction. It was in year 1688 when King of England, James II, retreated to France. However, the majority of Ireland was still loyal to him. When his Catholic Viceroy of Tyrconnell organized an army and suppressed the dissident Protestants, most of the fellows and the Provost of Trinity College left to England. Shortly after, it was followed by a college raid, which took away some horses and arms in a desperate need to re-equip the army. However, the Vice Provost and 4 of his colleagues remained, possibly hoping for the turbulent events to end soon. However, shortly after, King James II came to Kinsale, and college was commandeered for barracks, which forced the remaining fellows and students to leave the university. During this time, the college was used as a prison for the city's Protestants. And of course, because of that, most of the rooms were badly damaged. Well, on one occasion, the soldiers decided to destroy the library. And as they were about to set fire to the library's books, Dr. Michael Moore, who was the Catholic chaplain to Tyrconnell and was put as the head of the college at the time, intervened and prevented them from burning down the library, causing its full destruction. His memorial tablet, located in the 1937 reading room, reads, "At one time, head of this college, by whose exertions the library and its manuscripts were saved from destruction when the college was occupied by military forces in 1689. Well, after that, King William won his victory at the Boyne. Then James II retreated once again from Ireland, and the Protestant side of Dublin and its fortunes were restored. And as a result, the Provost and the fellows that flew to England were soon back. Trinity College and its library began to live again. 100 years after Trinity was founded, the library was still in the same location, on the upper floor of the south range of the Elizabethan quadrangle. It was described as an ordinary pile of building and can be distinguished from the outside. The library did not have its separate building. College grew and its library collection inevitably increased. George Berkeley, who was the librarian at the time, complained about the inadequacy of the premises, and the board was persuaded, and public money to improve the situation was given. Plans to build the new library were established, and on 1712 the foundation stone was laid. 20 years after, one of Trinity's great 18th century buildings was ready for use. It stands behind me. The architect was Thomas Burr, the first unmistakably and undisputably Irish architect, a graduate of this college. The building, the new library, is thought to be the culmination of Burr's classicism. Now it is one of the biggest single-chamber libraries in the world. It attracts almost 1 million tourists each year, and definitely one of the most beautiful ones as well. However, when Thomas Burr first built his library, it had a slightly different look. Its two pavilions were connected by open arcades, separated by a wall that ran along the center of the building. Above the arcades was the long room, which housed the collection and provided space for the readers. It is over 200 feet long and was first built with a flat ceiling of plaster, and then rebuilt with the present wooden barrel vaulting. It was a successful Victorian intervention into an older building, resulting in an extraordinary synthesis of Augustan classicism and Victorian Romanesque. In 1801, Trinity became a legal deposit library, which entitled it to claim free copies of all books, manuscripts, pamphlets, maps, published by British and Irish publishers. Consequently, space was needed to accommodate the constant inflow of books. In 1890s, the enclosing of the colonnades had been completed to provide additional space for books and enlarge the area for reading rooms. However, as you may have guessed, there was storage problems once again. The library now reached its full capacity, and talks began to build a separate building as a reading room to free up the space between the colonnades for book storage. The reading room was eventually built. However, the outbreak of the First World War, Easter Rising, the financial difficulties which college was facing have delayed this process. However, on 2nd of July 1937, college has finally acquired its reading room. But, as has been warned by some, it didn't solve the shortage of space problem. The legal deposit status meant that the books would continue to pour into the library, and now it was a matter of urgency to make provision for storing them. However, some suggested a new building. Some were close to the old library, presumably quite a sensitive location considering the architectural ensemble that has been formed in Trinity at that time. Well, if the building was to be completed, it would have to be an imposing piece of architecture. So the college, as a result, had adopted a very ambitious scheme to construct a building as large as the old library to its southeast corner. The building would have to accommodate space for reading, for administration, and for storing books. In 1957, the fundraising began. It was an important step in college's architectural history, as it was the first modern development of the college in its transition to the university we have today. Well, 10 years after the fundraising campaign began, in 1967, one of the most remarkable buildings on Trinity campus was built. Thanking the architect Paul Korolek, now the idiom of 20th century Brutalism stands in all of its beauty on Trinity campus. The building was strikingly modern in idiom and holds a firm stand as one of the most beautiful, astonishing buildings on campus. It was a strikingly successful addition to the architecture of college and the city of Dublin. The Brutalist gem, which celebrated its 50th year anniversary 6 years ago, has indeed succeeded the task of representing the 20th century to posterity as characteristically as the old library represents the 18th century. The building is indeed astonishing from the outside. However, on the inside, there's a whole new world to it. What's interesting about this building is that the architect, Paul Corlek, created a series of interior cell-like rooms which prioritized the reader and the experience of reading over the previously sacrosanct accommodation of books. The building is also often referred to as handmade, and the story behind it is quite interesting. Basically, during the time when the library was built, the Irish concrete industry wasn't developed too well, and when the architects came on site, they realized that the concrete they would have to use cannot be precasted, meaning that it was not possible to pre-make off-site and then transport it here to assemble. And because of that, they had to use in-situ concrete, basically pouring it on site. And what's interesting about this is that the building, the newly built library, is actually probably more handmade than the 18th century old library sitting just across the Fellows Garden. Now Trinity has numerous libraries to offer to its students to study and do their research. Remember that it was began 400 years ago as a collection of books and manuscripts to educate the population about the Protestant clergy. And now it is an internationally important resource and for sure one of the key foundational pillars of Trinity College. And I feel like it is our duty to keep it alive, keep it going, just like it has been for 400 years. Even though Trinity is Ireland's oldest university, it for sure strives for innovation. The new library is no longer new. New modern buildings have emerged on the campus. New schools have formed. Trinity has changed in volume, shape and size. And to reflect the society surrounding it, it itself has inevitably changed. I feel like today we live in quite an unusual world with a lot of disputes and uncertainties. We started to disagree with each other much more. Perhaps something which all of us could change about ourselves. Our world started to develop and change more rapidly than ever. Perhaps sometimes too fast for all of us to catch up with its speed of ideas. However, here you can find yourself sitting down in Front Square and thinking how for centuries students used to walk past the chapel, used to run to the exam hall while looking at their notes, and used to just sit on a bench and enjoy the view of the Campanile Tower. And you know, that gives me hope. It gives me hope because after all those turbulent centuries, Trinity is still here, and perhaps we will start to think again, start to reflect on ourselves, on the decisions which we make, so that in 100 years' time, our descendants will still have the Campanile to look at. I wonder if you're sad. Are you? You give us everything you have. You care for us. You raise us. And then we leave. Some return to you to bring back old memories, but some leave forever without saying goodbye. And I will have to leave as well. But you know, during those 5 years I was here, the world has changed, and so have I. I have seen happiness, I've seen sadness. I have met friends, met enemies. I've been loved by some and betrayed by others.
And may I say, I thank you all. You seem to find the perfect timing to enter thoughtfully my life. You were to me the lucky finding which guided me through day and night. You carved me like your own sculpture. From mixing in your highest culture, you have indeed become my home. The largest family, I owe a lot of gratitude and duty for all your listening, for all your beauty, for all those tough and simple steps. While looking at your tower cross, I wish I knew those future depths, which you will help me walk across.